saanud tulla siia Sofi Oksaneni kuulama. Sofi uus raamat Samasse jõkke Putini sõda naiste vastu on juba pälvinud palju tähelepanu üle terve maailma. See on sedakorda esseistika, mitte ilukirjandus, kuigi neid samasid teemasid on ta väga palju käsitlenud ka oma ilukirjanduses. Ja terav ja täpne sõna on tal nii esseistikas kui ka romaanides. Ja mida ta nüüd ise selle teema kohta tahab öelda veel, siis seda on võimalik kuulata tema ja Keiu Virro vestlused. Tahaks veel öelda, et kui teil on küsimusi pärast nende vestlust, siis küsimusi esitada võib eesti keeles, Sofi võib vastata veel inglise keeles, aga kui on vaja natuke selgitada, siis seda saab ka eesti keeles selgitada. Ja kui nende vestluses mõni koht vajaks ka eesti keeles selgitamist, siis seda palun küsige ka. Aga nüüd head kuulamist. Tere!
Nii, aga me jätkame siis inglise keeles. Loodame, et kõigil, kellel tekib mõni küsimus vahepeal, on hea sõber, kelle käest küsida pisut täpselt. So, I put my English ready. This is, I was just thinking that today is such awful weather, but I guess we are lucky that when the bad weather is the worst of the problems, then it's good to be here. Well, 2019, you wrote a book, Autoriga. This was also connected with the subject of the war. It was after the war started in 2014 in Ukraine. But it was novel, as Krista also said, that most of your works have been fiction, plays, novels. But why did you choose different kind of genre for the Putin's war against women?
Well, Koerte Park was a novel because since 2014 I have been waiting that Western publishers will open up and start publishing books about Ukraine. And nothing happened. I waited and nothing happened. So I thought, okay, I'm not a Ukrainian, but the only thing an author can do is to write. So I'll write a book about Ukraine. Ukraine's recent past. And then after the invasion started, I had the same feeling as many Ukrainian poets, and that is that metaphors are not enough anymore, or not as we speak. Or like Ukrainian poet Halina Kruk has said that poetry doesn't save you if you are trying to escape, to take your children to safety in your car, and then the car is trashed by a Russian tank. So I have the same feeling that we need more direct words. It doesn't mean that I don't believe in the power of art, not at all, but to talk about war, we need more direct words, and to talk about the gendered violence that Russia is using in its domestic politics, international politics, and as a weapon of war, we need also more direct words. I gave a speech at the Swedish Academy about the same subject, and the feedback was so good that everybody was encouraging me to write an extended essay about the same things, and so I did. Yeah.
Last year I was in London in a literature festival, and why I'm scrolling my phone right now is that I'm looking for the quote from one Ukrainian writer, also, Olena Stiashkina, because she said something that relates also the same subject, that she was also one of the writers that swapped writing in Russian to Ukrainian language, because writing in Russian language seems somehow supporting all of the violence. She said Kiev and other cities are crying out to the world to help, and she understands that words are not enough. No book seems to mean anything anymore against the great evil. Yet she said that there must be words, that we live in the knowledge that every word we say could be our last, and war has increased the likelihood of that. When we write to each other, we don't want to die a coward, pitying, crying for the life. But I don't know, you already mentioned it, but what is your view of what can writers do? What is the things like about poetry, about targeting different subjects?
Well, poetry and fiction and novels can give words to emotions that have no words, because the poetry and fiction has the meanings between the lines, and the more traumatic the experience, the more helpful actually art can be, because people, a traumatized person might not even recognize their own feelings, so you don't have words for them. So in that way, fiction and poetry serves this purpose, and that then an essay or more direct words, they can give you a more analytical view on the matters, and also in that way help verbalize things that you need to tell the other people, or the outer world. Now I'm referring, when I'm talking about outer world, I'm talking about other Western countries. I know in Estonia people understand all this, but there are many countries where people might not actually understand what's happening in Ukraine, and they might think that it doesn't play any role in their life, that it doesn't actually have any importance to their children or their grandchildren, for example, which is not the case. And that's why I wanted to write about these matters, and especially from female perspective, because the female perspective is something that is again getting lost in this war, or the war talk, and also, well, in that way, in one way it makes sense, because of course Ukraine needs weapons, and therefore we need to talk about the weapons, but also because sexual violence is a weapon of war, and Russia is going to continue using the same weapon of war because they have tradition for it, and because it's so cheap, and because they haven't ever been held accountable for that. Therefore, to stop that, we need to talk more about these matters to that outer world. And in that way, I encourage every single Estonian to talk more about Estonian recent past, and to talk about Estonian experience under Soviet occupation, because it seems that that everything that is happening now in Ukraine, and that is something that Estonians know very well, and yet it seems to me that there are so many countries where people have been surprised and shocked, like how can this happen? Because, well, it happens because Russia hasn't been held accountable, and it's going to happen again and again and again if Russia is not held accountable. It is as simple as that. But you just have to tell that to people over and over again, even though I have to say that I had actually hoped that there had been more progress, but obviously there hadn't been progress.
Do you also say that the sexual violence is the kind of the war crime that people tend to not overlook, but at least it's not like considered so important? What kind of war crime? Why is that?
There are multiple different reasons. One of the reasons is that it is, when it comes to trials, it is very, very difficult to get a verdict. Now, since 2022, the situation is different in many ways. For example, Ukrainians are gathering evidence as we speak, forensic evidence, which gathering it in this way hasn't ever been possible before. And the good thing is that it doesn't actually grow old. So if you find a DNA of a perpetrator and there's evidence, it will stay. And I'm hoping that it is something that the perpetrator's grandchildren might find out. So this is of course something that we are aware of, but I'm not sure if the Russian soldiers are aware of this, for example. And of course, if they think that, now in Finland we have one Russian war criminal waiting for the trial. He had managed to come to Finland under another name, and Finnish authorities didn't notice anything until the Ukrainians told them that you have one of our war criminals there. And as far as I know, I'm talking to people who actually had met him when he was in 2014 and 15 in eastern Ukraine. He had been very proud of what he had done, and he had the thinking of future in a Slavic empire. So he actually, I have a feeling that he actually believed in it. It was a matter of belief. So I'm sure that this kind of person doesn't actually think that he's doing anything wrong. But it's another matter if you help them to think, because he has children, that maybe your grandchildren don't think like that.
I guess this is the thing that is the hardest to wrap the head around, that people actually don't understand that it is wrong what they're doing. And then it's also sad to think about that women are the one who are kind of supporting it all. Because if they're not mothers or wives who are saying that this is okay, you are allowed to go and rape women, do something like that, it would be so much harder, because I guess everyone have to have this kind of belief inside.
Yes, and also in Ukraine, many women actually don't know that rape is a war crime. So in that way, we need also to raise awareness of your rights, and also that what it actually means. That something, because there are also, it is so easy to count amputated limbs. That's kind of concrete number, but when we come to anything under umbrella of sexual violence, then it becomes more difficult to count, and that's where we come to the question about how to take it to the court, how to make people accountable. But that's why I'm also talking in this book about justice in general. Of course, if our legal system is too slow or it's not perfect, we can make it more perfect. But to be able to do that, we also do need trials, we need more research, and have to say that sexual violence as a war crime is an underreported and under-researched subject matter. If you think about the number of titles about the war, about the Second World War. So how many books there are about the sexual violence during the Second World War? Only a few. And even if you think about the number of books about Holocaust, that's quite high. But it wasn't actually until recently when Holocaust and sexual violence have been connected. And it wasn't that long ago when actually the first research about sexual violence during the Holocaust was published. So not even in the most covered war crimes you can find titles about these matters. And that's when we go back to the question about money, because research requires money. And what kind of subject matters are considered important enough to be funded?
Who decides?
Who decide? People decide. In democratic states, people decide. So in that way, vote correctly.
That's good, what the political choice is. But I would like to come back.
But one more thing is also that the sexual violence is extremely difficult subject matter to cover in media. And again, media does have an impact on political decisions. And I do not, I actually dislike all kind of, disclaimers, beware, there will be violence in this program and so on. I don't like it, to be honest, because that's already some kind of reading instruction. We don't know what disturbs a reader or a viewer, we don't actually know. But if you are telling them that something horrible is going to be, in front of your eyes, then that is already an instruction. And I think we should react to sexual violence and talk about it as some other war crime, and not like a especially horrible war crime. It is, but I mean, it doesn't mean that we have to tell the audience all the time about it. We have to just, treat it like, well, we are talking about it right now.
Yes, and also you mentioned that it's a subject that maybe people don't want to talk about because it's disturbing, and like this would somehow makes it cease to exist. But it's really
yeah, it is. That is true. But the more we talk about it, the less there is shame for the victims, and the shame should be on the perpetrators.
I was thinking also about how people are, what are the words that you are putting to something. There is rape against women, raping women, but if men, they are also raped, then it's called, as you say, also torture, for example. It's not like the same thing even somehow. And that brings me maybe a wider question about the target audience. You said some things about it already, but I was, just before we started, I was talking here with my friend who have already read the book, and she had the same feeling, and I guess I do, that this is the book that I would have read anyway, even if we're not talking here. She would have read it anyway. But we are also reading Masha Gessen, who is writing about Putin and Russia. We are also reading Mikhail Shishkin. We are already, we get something new from every kind of this book, but we are already in some kind of same level. But there are so many communication, it's not communication errors, but the thing that people don't realize. For example, how you mentioned that the Russian soldiers, they might not even, not only that they don't actually understand that they're making like it's war crimes, but also that they don't maybe understand the concept of charity, that people can be in their good heart to give something away, or the Western countries who don't have this experience, they don't understand the same as like the former USSR countries. Like there are so many different misunderstandings. But if you wrote the book, did you have some kind of like specific people who you would really, really want to read it? I would guess like the Russian soldier is not going to read and say like, yes, this is now I understand that it's a rape and that rape is bad.
No, I don't think Russian soldiers are going to read this one. I was, well, I'm following the news every day, but I'm not expecting every single person on this globe to do so. And if you think about all the people in the world who haven't ever been to Russia or to Ukraine or to Estonia, and I wanted to write the book that could be understandable to them as well. I wanted to write a book that is very accessible to different generations, to different genders, and to very different readers, so that you don't need a map to be able to read a book about the war in Ukraine. That you don't need to read the news all the time to understand what's happening. I have a feeling that that the big picture of the war is kind of lost in everyday reporting, and the big picture is exactly what I'm hoping that that everybody understands everywhere. And what I've now learned with my novels as well, but with translations of this book, is that actually this colonial system as such is very easily understandable to many people all over the world. They just haven't connected the colonialism to Russia. So if I'm happy if I manage to reach those readers who already understand the colonialism and what imperialism means to colonize, and if they are able to see the same pattern in Russian behavior, then I have a feeling that the book has been successful.
Yeah, but I guess it's really hard, because when the colonialism background, when you say that something is connected to that, then we always have to think about our own history. Estonia also don't want to, like, we are always the victims, but we do have our connections also to colonialism and so on and so forth. So I think like this is really interesting to think about the psychology in that sense, reading your book also, because for example, for me it's not so much different, like the whole country and the colonialism, than when the, let's say, mother from Dagestan whose son has been killed in the war, to think that he did the right thing because she wants that his son would have had a reason to die, that it wasn't just for nothing.
Yes. Well, we cannot change Russia from the inside. Russians have to do it themselves. But we can change the world outside Russia, and that is actually on our responsibility. And also to make the structures in Russia's behavior more visible. And because in many countries, people are not very used to talk about Russian colonialism, we have to make it more normal. More normal, just like we have to make it more normal to talk about sexual violence and war rape. The more normal the language is, the more clear it also becomes, and in that way, every single word counts. I've seen a very positive progress in Finland. They have started to use the word decolonization even in newspapers in 2003. So that's progress. That's a huge progress. Because Finland is also one of those countries where people haven't actually, they are not used to call Russian empire or imperialistic terms are not used to be connected with Russia. I do see a huge change in the language, which I see as a very positive progress. And now we just have to make sure that we are not going back to the former language.
Question for you, maybe personal question to you as a writer, but also as an individual. When you're writing on such kind of subjects, then you are even more into those subjects than we are all because of the media. How does it make you feel? I mean, is it the way, if you try to understand it more, is it also therapy maybe? Is it that do you feel that you can do something against it, or maybe it's also depressing somehow because you are just like in this really dark subject?
Well, the subject, subject matters are depressive, of course, but if I'm doing something about it, then I'm not feeling depressed, and the only thing I can do is to write about it. That's the only thing I'm able to do. So in that way, that's my duty, actually, as an author, but also as an author whose passport is Finnish passport. That is that my nationality is from the country where we are enjoying highest level of freedom of expression. So in that way, if I don't speak, then who does?
And you have hope?
Well, at least this book is out in many countries. That's a sign that there is interest to read it. And I don't take it for granted at all. Also, when of course, I've been writing about the Estonian Holocaust and about the Soviet Union and deportations now for 20 years. And I thought that, okay, deportations is something that people know about. But now, when the news broke about Ukrainians being deported to Russia, and then I understood that actually people don't know about deportations, because I'm sure that also Estonians have noticed that there has been the international media has had difficulties in finding the correct words, how to tell about these deportations. So in that way, actually it has been a clever way of phrasing it as a kidnapping of Ukrainian children to Russia, because then actually most people understand it, but they still don't understand why Russia is acting in this way. So in that way, it seems like that we need to talk about the recent past, quite simply. That we just have people doing that. That's also for our national defense.
Yeah, I'm still sometimes struggling to understand how we think or write about history, even if that is in here, like really close to Estonia. For example, a few years ago, Julia Aug made a performance about Jews in Estonia and what happened to them in the Second World War. Then many of the people who went to see the performance got to know first time that Estonia also had really things to do against Jews, that we were the Judenfrei country and so on. So there are some kind of like this kind of spots in history that people right now, I don't think they know, and maybe it's connected also with the same thing as the colonialism subject, as we don't want to know. So it's
you have to remember that in Estonia the Holocaust was taught for during the whole Soviet occupation through the Soviet narration. So in that way, it's totally understandable that in Estonia the understanding or the knowledge about the Holocaust in Estonia it's a bit different, because you cannot erase the 50 years of history education in an eye-blink. It just doesn't happen like that. It takes generations, most likely, and we need new research, new reliable research, simply. And there's a huge gap between Western and Eastern European countries about how Holocaust has been taught, about the research about the Holocaust, and about the historical memory about the Holocaust, and also what Holocaust is actually symbolizing. So it's if you think about all the I visited Babi Yar years back in Ukraine, and I really struggled to find the location. I had read about it, so I kind of knew how it should look like, but it was practically impossible. I did find the Soviet monument, all the tourist guides were also following, and also the taxi driver knew where the Soviet monument was. So we went to the Soviet monument. The Soviet monument didn't look like that it is geographically located on a Babi Yar, which is a gorge. And then I saw the Soviet monument. The Soviet monument was not talking about Holocaust, it was not talking about Jews, it was talking only about the torments of the Soviet citizens. So I thought that I want to find the real place, the historically factual place of the genocide. And I saw Jews, you know, the conservative Jews, and I actually followed them. They knew where the place was, and I did find the place. But it was a very small memorial, and it was not well kept as such, but it was obviously a memorial. And then I was walking around it, and I saw that also that actually the gorge was also kind of place where people who came to the park through all the cart. So it looked like a place where young people went to drink. There were also used condoms, toilet paper, and plenty of vodka bottles. So this is something that, you know, tells that there are, it's a memorial of a genocide, but part of the population didn't know what it was. So in that way, this is kind of a very good example of simply that if a nation doesn't have a mutual understanding of certain matters, like Holocaust, for example, there will be problems. And we need also to talk about simply that why different groups have a different understanding or image of something. In Western countries, the image of Holocaust is so much defined by Schindler's List, for example. There are certain books and certain movies have really made the difference and have a difference after one generation after another. But there's less talk about how, for example, KGB used Holocaust for its own historical fiction and falsified also facts. And we cannot skip this part of this whole story, how genocides can be also used for the political purpose, and we need to talk about that as well. And it's not actually denial of Holocaust, it's just, you know, that is the reason why some people actually don't believe everything. And this is again something we need to talk about more.
So soon I will let people ask questions, I'm sure that you have. But what have been Ukrainians' feedback this far?
The Ukrainian translation is not yet out. It will be, but it's not yet out. So, but I've had
first readers then.
First readers have read it in other languages, but it has been a very positive feedback. I know that. And what might be, I don't know, interesting maybe for you is that Germany, which has been a complicated country in many ways, and I'm sure that it must have been frustrated with the Chancellor Scholz. But actually, all the German journalists and readers I've met are very much with Ukraine. And also I've met quite many readers whose grandmothers, aunts, great aunts actually have been violated by Red Army. And it has been like an unspoken story in the family. And they definitely think that we should talk more about it. So when I was writing about this, I wasn't actually thinking about, you know, Germany, but there are many untold stories touching this topic as well in Germany. And then France has been interesting because France is a country where people are very much used to talk about colonialism, but they just haven't connected it with Russia. But when you talk about colonialism to French people, they understand it all, but for them it's a revelation that Russia is acting in this way. Then it's Italy. Italy is an interesting place in many ways because Russia has been pouring so much money on the right-wing parties. So media is very much affected actually by Russian propaganda. But then again, maybe there are regional differences. Because I was recently on Amalfi Coast and I was talking to taxi drivers. I always ask taxi drivers about all sorts of local things. And I heard from the taxi drivers that they actually haven't ever had too many Russian tourists. And so I was asking, well, so why? How come? And they said that we don't like them here. And I was this was interesting because I was thinking about the Italy as a that there's Russian money and it does have its impact on the media. And then actually Russian tourists don't like the coast because there are so many steps. So it's, complicated to walk there and they don't like it. And besides also Russian oligarch had been trying to buy a private beach and they didn't sell it to them. So I was thinking maybe if you think about Italy, complicated relationship with Russia, but maybe it's regional. So I have to investigate this more. But anyway, and then again, Spanish territory is also something I always felt easy to relate to or to talk to actually, because they know quite a lot about colonialism. So if you talk about colonialism to them, they understand what you are talking about. And if you say that Russia is like that, then they actually understand it.
And now it's time for the questions. Eesti keeles küsida on igati hea.
On lubatud.
Ja, loomulikult.
Sofi on kena, energiline ja tunnetarikas inimene. Alles kirja nüüd selle jubedat loo, mis siin on. Ma olen lugenud. See tegelikult mõjutab lugejat, aga mõjutab ka kirjanikku süü. Kuidas te suudate seda kõik süüdlased ise üle elada, mida te olete kirja pannud, et hakata järgmist raamatut kirja panema, mis ei ole jubedat?
Well, actually, I do have a new novel on the way, and I'm afraid the subject matter is not very hilarious. But no, I've always thought that writing gives me clarity, and it makes sense to things that make no sense. So in that way, writing is kind of a way to cope with matters as well.
Kõige lühemalt kokkuvõttes on kirjutamine moodus, kuidas kõigega tegelikult hakkama saada.
Aga ainult oskad.
Ma tegin selles kõige mugavama tõlk. Need küsimused. Kas võin see mikrofoni lõpuga?
Aitäh! Üks asi, millele mina olen mõelnud ja ma ei tea, kas siit raamatust leias selle vastuse, aga et lugedes Baltasar Russovi kroonikat, kus siis 16. sajandi tegevusasend leiab, siis on seal väga palju paralleeli tegelikult tänapäevaga sellega, mis Ukrainas toimub ka, et selles suhtes, eks ole, see, mida nad seal teevad, ei ole sugugi enneolematu, aga et nad on oma sõdmismeetodites justkui jäänud kinni kas siis vara uusaega või keskaega, samal ajal kui ülejäänud maailm on edasi läinud. Et mis võiks küll selle põhjus olla, et kunagi see oli mais 2022, sõda oli käinud 2 kuud, siis ma käisin Ukrainas, Harkivis ja Kiievis oli võimalik kohtuda siis peaprokuröri asetäitjaga ja prokuröriga, kuidas ükskõik kumba pidi seda öelda. Kus oli juhtu, et tolleks ajaks oli juba neid kaasuseid, mis oli dokumenteeritud, kui mälu mind ei peta, siis kuskil 8-9 tuhande vahel, mitte siis muidugi ainult naistevastase vägivalla kaasuseid, vaid erinevaid sõjakuritegusid kokku, eks ole, praegu isegi ei tea, palju see on ja vahet ei ole, sest on see arv nagu teine, et müstilised suured numbrid. Et kuidas jah, nad on suutnud nagu niimoodi ajahambast puremata jääda ja suudavad ikka keskajal edasi võtta?
A big question. We are all wondering about that. No, but it's actually. I was in the book. I'm referring to Russian law, or actually Russian Empire's law, because I found out something that actually surprised me, that it was. It was actually during the Tsarist Empire. It was actually very easy to get a divorce, or actually the divorce was surprisingly equal, which made it actually more progressive divorce law in Europe. And this was a kind of revelation to me. I hadn't known about it, but if Russian researchers would actually do the research about what has actually happened, they might also find something else that could be actually telling about different kind of past, or that there have been like seeds for different future, but they never choose to do that, or it doesn't become like a big narration. Instead, there's this fabricated fixation with so-called conservative values. And I don't know. It's a big question. But I mean, if the nation doesn't want to change itself, then what is there to do?
Yeah, I guess it's the question about how people are developing the narrative, that most of the people tend to see, I guess, who are writing about Russia, like all of the signs have been showing what is happening right now in different ways. But as you said about this law, but also there has been different kind of moments that Russia has had some kind of like really progressive laws for women to have women actually do something. So there, like, this is kind of this cognitive error to think about. Küsimusi? Kasutage võimalust.
But of course, I mean, Russia didn't have Renaissance in the way we had. They didn't have Reformation. They didn't have Enlightenment in the same way. So maybe we don't even see, ourselves, how we have become who we are, why certain values are important to us, why we take them for granted. It's just, the progress has been going on for hundreds of years, and Russia's development has been simply different.
Soomlased, kaasa ka teie, on jätnud viimase 2 aasta jooksul väga soliidse kuvandi neile eestlastele. Kui teie president Niinistö ütles Putinile, vaata teelisse, ja oli asi tehtud. Ja tehtigi 2 aastat ära. Bravo.
Well, yeah, I have to say that the biggest surprise to me has been that over one night in Finland, the political turn has been like totally opposite to the before, but also the language and the public conversation had changed overnight. And that was interesting, because, and speaking of positive development, and that is a positive development. I was born in 1977. I went to school in Finland at the time when, according to Finnish history books, Estonia joined the merry family of Soviet republics free willingly. So I went to school at a time when the education at the school was definitely very much Finlandicized. So compared to that, there has been a huge development. It was still in 90s. It was kind of like that, but there was a change in 2000 something. But still, you could, for Finns, it was very difficult to talk publicly about Russia. So there was this hush-hush culture which changed in 2022. And besides, something, I guess something tells about the Finnish reaction to Russian activities is that all the guns were immediately sold out.
Ja siis viimase, kuidas on siis reklaamina, et seda ja palju muud saate te lugeda juba raamatust. Raamatut saab täna siin soodsamalt osta. Meie aeg, nagu te minu sellest kõnepoole tüürimisest aru saate, on tasapisi siin läbi saamas, aga ma oletan, et saab ka autogramm raamatusse ja ei valeta midagi. Ühesõnaga, suur aitäh teile, et te olete tulnud läbi selle tänase ilma, võtnud selle aja, kuulanud. Ma loodan, et te leiate selle aja selle raamatu lugemiseks. Ei ole lihtne, aga on väga-väga vajalik.
Oli ka kena ju kokku saada.
Ei ole paha olnud. Vestluspartner. Suur aitäh, Sofi.
Tänan.